Good evening, everybody, and welcome
Hey.
back. It's good to see you guys.
Hey.
Hey, this is the official Earth Dog Studios UFO podcast. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Rendlesham forest incident. But before we get started, let's take just a second and introduce the research team. To my right, C. Michael Lanning. Let's start with you, sir. Tell us who you are. Mostly, what are you known for?
Oh gosh, hanging around on the internet shows. That's see Michael Lanning, independent artist, done work for various things, including with Rodney Fike down there on Doghouse, and
It's a good
with
crew.
JD Calderon on Magi's Grace, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So you see me floating around the ICN network.
Yeah, it's good to have you, man. It's good to have you.
It's great to
welcome
be
back. Hey, I got to say, welcome to Todd. Welcome back. Tell us who you are and what you're mostly known for.
How you guys doing tonight? My name is Todd Tochioka. I'm a letterer and mostly letterer, but I also color. Do most of my lettering with Image Comics, and the coloring that I did was mostly for Shadowline, Jim Valentino's branch of Image Comics. But yeah, I am, man, right now I'm just so busy lettering a bunch of projects. People have been contacting me for their crowdfunding things. I'm still lettering for Sabaton and possibly doing some other.
Congratulations, Todd, on the Sabaton book. I got one. It looks amazing. It's a super high quality product.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'll get copies of the next one for you guys too.
Yeah, that's kick-ass. Thank you very much. Hey, and I gotta say, man, I'm excited about this. It's great to see my pal Rodney Fike.
Hey guys, how you doing? Artist writer Rodney Fike. Work with our company Hasm Productions. I worked with his Roadkill Rampage and as Steve mentioned, House, which he and I did together. Various other things over the course of way too many years to mention. I do a little bit of everything. So,
yeah. Welcome back, Rodney. It is great to have you. So we're going to start out by talking about Rendlesham Forest. This was in December of 1980. There's basically two theories. We'll start right at the top with C. Michael Lanning. Some will say that this was an exercise in military intelligence, the meaning we wanted to see what American soldiers would do if they thought they saw a UFO. That's option one. Option two, these guys saw a UFO. C. Michael Lanning, which one was it?
Well, I'm going to say, considering if this was a military exercise, was a pretty elaborate one using some really high-tech technical stuff for this to happen, especially in 1980. It's some real, I have my doubts that it's just that. I even heard that it was the British playing a hoax on the American thing, because that, not far from there was the Air Force base. But yeah, I don't think that ends.
Yeah, well, let's clear that up a little bit. So the Americans actually had leased the air base from the RAF. So there was Americans there, there was British there. First of all, Todd, do you find it a little bit fishy that the American airmen were there? Why did they need to be at this Bentwater Air Base?
Yeah, during this time, though, we were still in the Cold War with Russia and whatnot. And in order to solidify our defenses and to post strategic defense, we had leased so many different Air Force areas throughout the world, throughout Western Civ. And this just happened to be one of them. Now, if the British did pull a prank, I'd heard that one too. Man, it was a good prank.
Yeah. Right.
It was an exercise, which a lot of these things, a lot of these conspiracy theories that come up about certain items, everyone always talks about, oh, there was an exercise happening in the town over or that day. I don't know if that's just like a go-to excuse or what, but I'll tell you what, when you read what was reported and the details that were taken, I mean, something really happened, and these guys were scared shitless by something that they couldn't explain.
It was something weird.
Audio recordings are just, man, you can tell that they're chilled to the bone with what's going on,
Yeah, and as I love to point out too, these are men that were designed to perform under these kind of pressures. They were wartime guys, and they still saw something that completely freaked them out. Rodney, how about you? You got the two theories. One is that it's an exercise to see what servicemen will do when seeing a UFO, or number two, these guys saw a UFO. Which one is it?
why can't it be both?
Oh, wow. That's
I mean, that's my thought pattern is maybe it was both. By all accounts of the two servicemen who actually had contact with the vehicle, that's a hell of a hoax. That's a lot of bells and whistles to go through for the one guy to touch it and have all the thoughts and everything transmitted through his brain, however that was done.
right. Yeah.
Well, and there's a couple of elements.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, I'm right here. A couple of elements that are a little bit troubling. One of them is that you kind of have two governments involved, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that it takes place over 2 nights, which is odd, right? It wasn't just the one night of sightings. Right. It was 2 nights. And the third thing is the physical descriptions, which again, you're talking about servicemen that are trained to describe, typically meteorological things, other aircraft, stuff like that. And here they see what is potentially an otherworldly craft, and they make Rodney mentioned, 2 of the guys touched it, right? And it supposedly starts shimmering in front of them and maybe trying to communicate. We're going to talk about that in a second. But if it was an exercise, how do you make something like this? What's going on here? C. Michael Lanning, what do you think of the descriptions?
Oh my gosh. The thing about it is when they're talking about trying to get up to this aircraft, the air is so heavy. It says it's almost like they were swimming, like when you walking in water, and it lightened up by the time they got to it. But how would you even do that? How would you transmit something to make the air that heavy that it feels like you're walking through water?
Right. One of the suggestions was that maybe time had stopped, right?
Yeah.
The 2 guys that were walking around it said that they could see their shadows on the craft as they walk. I'm sorry, not shadows, like a reflection, I guess you'd say.
Right.
But then the reflection was not keeping pace with them, right? So Todd, what do you think? We talked about this a month ago. Sure. Potentially a time travel device?
Hey, there's a lot that can be going on with just even certain energies that we have here terrestrially, magnetics, electromagnetics. We use the expression, the air is so thick you could cut it with a knife, or the air is so electric you can just feel it. You felt it at concerts. I felt it when we were at events with tons of people. So could that be a figure of speech? Could be. But they were also really terrified and under quite a bit of duress there. And again, seeing something that they really could not comprehend at all, right?
Right. So, guys, I was kind of saving this question. I think it's a great question for artists and a great question for letterers, I suppose, in particular. One of the allegations that there were these symbols, or maybe you might say they were kind of like hieroglyphs on the side of this craft that supposedly came out a little bit when the 2 men were touching them. Some people have said things like, look, this is a type of language. They're trying to communicate with us somehow. And there's a few, again, allegedly, pretty clear representations of the symbols that were on the craft. They look a little bit like what you see here. And I was telling C backstage, to me, the one that's the second from left looks a little bit like a man. C. Michael Lanning, what do you make of this language, if it is that, and what are they trying to say to us?
I'm not too sure. Maybe the first one's an alien head and like a bust.
I could
for
see
that
instance,
and maybe that could be their probe device. The next one, that's a joke. I'm sorry, but maybe the middle one looks like a satellite almost. And let's say that's kind of like a cross communication to humankind and space exploration. And that's sense.
Yeah, I get that.
I mean, let's take it back. Alien head. Maybe this has something similar to do with their own form of communication or transportation, and that's how they see ours on the other side. And that satellite with the 2 T's underneath it is a indication of trying to communicate.
That looked to me like that might be some sort of tool, maybe. I don't know. Rodney, I think I almost skipped you. I definitely want to hear from all 3 of you here. Rodney Fike, what do you make of this? Is it a language? Is it something else? Is it a keep off sign? What do you make of it?
I think it's icons like you have on your computer or you have on a VCR. the first symbol to me, the first time I saw that, I thought it looked like a play and stop button on a recorder,
Mhm.
kind of mashed together.
Yeah, sure.
The fourth symbol to me could be a man in a very graphic sense. And the
Yep.
fifth symbol is kind of a pause and stop merged icons from a tape recorder. I mean, I always look for similarities to what we know exists as far as languages and icons and stuff on stuff that we use. So that relatability, even though they're merged in a couple of areas, I just wonder. That makes me think that is it something like a pause button, or if you push this button, it'll play a message for you. Because like C mentioned, that symbol in the middle, it looks like a satellite, like it's beaming a signal, and it's getting
I
smaller
get that.
and smaller as you go down.
I definitely see that. So, Todd, I don't think we heard from you yet. I mean, is it a language? First of all, it's obviously just symbols. Maybe it's not saying it. Maybe it's the interstellar version of, keep off the edge of the craft. It gets hot, something like that. Right? Like humans tend to be idiots and keep walking up here.
It says slippery when wet.
Slippery when wet. Right? Actual mileage may vary.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Todd, what does it say, man? What are they trying to say to us?
That literally could be the vehicle's license plate. So, I mean, we really don't know.
Hey, we get some good comments here.
Symbols say, oh, that looks like that, or that looks like that, or we try and relate to what we know here. But man, if this is alien, or let's say otherworldly in any shape or form, we have no idea what this could mean. I mean, really, this really could be something that could change the way that humanity has kind of run itself, or this literally could just be an open or close symbol for this vehicle, or maybe to start it up, or I don't know. Because there is nothing that we can look at really. And again, we can look at these icons and these shapes and say, okay, we can identify this terrestrially to mean this, but who knows? We have no idea what this means.
And it was like Rodney was saying, it's difficult to even, how do I want to say this? Even interpreting the symbols is kind of meaningless, because if you don't know what step one is, there's no way to make sense of it. Like right. It could be something related to time rather than space. It could be something theoretical.
Can I add something to what you're saying?
Yeah, sure.
Especially the time thing. So Pendleton, who touched the aircraft, got the picture of the symbols and all that.
Right.
Was writing down in his notebook. Pope, who would help wrote the story and translate those symbols and everything, came across in his notebook several 011s, 10, binary code.
Right.
Well, they took that binary code to a CODIS or whatever you want to call them to translate it. And the thing about it is, there were several locations there, Great Pyramids, Stonehenge. What's really interesting is there was an island that is only on older maps that are not on any modern day maps. Like that island has completely disappeared. So I can't remember. I think it's off the coast of Ireland, if I'm not mistaken.
Huh.
But some of the language is what was the word? It was the discovery of humanity, year 8,421, I think. So one of the theories is, if you're going to time travel, the easiest way to communicate with anybody backwards and forward is to use binary code.
Chris has a point.
That use binary code. So yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is if it's time travel, like you kept bringing up time.
Yeah. And look, hey, I get the way that sounds. I'm not necessarily one of the time travel speculators. I think Todd is more so a little bit than me. But it is one of the ingredients that seems to come up almost every time. Right?
I just want Big Macs for a quarter. That's all.
Hey, you guys, I want to take a second and talk about some of the military elements of this sighting. Here's what I mean by this. We've been talking on some of the other shows about the fact that for years, the government has seemingly conspired to cover up these incidents. And it's one thing whether you agree with that or not. Actually, let's maybe start there. See, Michael, do you think that the government conceals existence of UFO evidence? Yes or no?
Yes, if whatever it is, if it's alien or if it's any other thing that we don't know what it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then why do you think it is?
Why do I think they do it?
Right. Who cares?
Same reason. I mean, they to exploit it in some. I think number one, to exploit it. If you do have, if you're a country that has access to advanced technology, no matter where it comes from, you don't want other countries to know that you have it.
Right.
So
that's a pretty good point. Todd, how about you? Do you think the government conceals evidence of UFO technology?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, if they're going to make it this hard to not use so much petroleum for, let's say, our vehicles, right? There's no reason. I mean, there's no reason they're not covering up something about like UFO technology or anything like that, right? Yeah, they have every reason to cover it up. Every reason, from, let's say, how that would affect world theology to how that would affect just. Gosh.
Okay. Hold the world theology one. We got that one coming up in round 5. Rodney, let's move this over to you. So first off, does the government conceal evidence, and why? Why do you think it is?
Absolutely, they do. And I think they do because they assume that the world population can't handle it because of the religious implications.
Yeah, you're headed toward question 5. Don't expand on that one too much. But I will say, let's start with what we call the HALT memorandum. First of all you guys are exactly right. There's numerous amounts of evidence that point to this, and it's very irregular. Here's what I mean by that. Even the Rendlesham Forest incident is now declassified. But when you go back and read the information, you're going to go, oh my God, like some of it's kind of shocking. One of those documents, as we're seeing right here, is called the HALT memorandum. And basically it describes an Air Force colonel seeing a UFO. In my opinion, that's what it is. What I want to ask you guys is, okay, if it was classified the first time, why declassify it now? This incident's 44 years ago. Rodney, why declassify
it? I think that the governments of the world, with the technology that exists today with the internet and the world being because of that, the world becoming much smaller, that they realize that the cat's, pretty much out of the bag. So I think they're doing a slow release of evidence to kind of prepare the world's population for the inevitable, because they can only keep it up for so long. So
what do you mean by the inevitable? Expand on that a little bit.
The inevitable of revealing, it's probably going to be something that's out of their hands that they're not going to be able to control. I'm talking first contact.
Gotcha.
With the general public. They've obviously had, when I say them, I mean world governments, not just the United States, for centuries. You go back in time, it's plenty documented. You just have to be able to understand what you're reading when you read, historical texts and things like that. But I think it's a slow release method of conditioning folks to accept, with as little upheaval as possible when it actually does happen. Kind of a slow transition into just a general acknowledgement that, oh yeah, they're here.
Yeah. Get to a comfort level, I suppose.
Yeah.
Let's move this over to C. Michael. So the HALT memorandum, right? It's classified at first and then declassified. Why? It just seems strange.
Okay. The thing about it is what did they actually declassify?
Mm-hmm.
If you read some of it, it seems, there's some stuff there, but there seems to be some stuff that's left out. But it was also because of the Freedom of Information Act.
Made them do
also. So they had to release something. Now, if you talk to Pendleton and what was it? The other guy was Burroughs, I think. I can't remember his name exactly, but they were bullied into giving false statements at first about what had happened. Both of them said the same thing. So just because this is released doesn't necessarily, we'll call this unclassified, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's unclassified. There's probably a level underclassified, like under basement in the ground, mantle core classified that you can't unclassify that.
Yeah, the Freedom of Information Act is fine, but
yeah,
how much of it is redacted?
right.
Well, yeah, and there's still some parts of this that are blacked out.
There's what they let us see, and then there's what actually exists.
Todd, we didn't hear from you yet on this one. Again, I find that to be one of the odd elements of Rendlesham is the classification and then declassification. What's your 2 cents about that?
Yeah, I think I agree with what's been said. I think I'd release something, right? And whether it's really what happened or not, we will never know.
Right.
And like C was saying, man, I mean, there are things that they'll put out there for us, and then there are things that, man, we'll never know.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
I mean, they could release it. Oh, I'm sorry. They could release it and say, okay, so you read this and they're talking about what they saw, but they're not giving you an explanation for it, right? They're just telling you what they saw. They didn't say, oh, it was this. So they kind of left that out. They're not, oh, there were some lights they saw. You can just, it's up to you to decide. What do you feel? That kind of classification.
All right, let's take a swing at this deep question. Ready? Because I can tell we're all slowly tap dancing around it. If there is proof of an alien civilization or a visitation, does that conflict with faith? My meaning here is people will say things like, let me see if I can give you a for instance. Hey, well, if there's an alien, that disproves all the major religions, right? See, I'm going to start with you first. This is a hard one. Do you think that an existence of an alien, does it disprove religion?
No, I don't see why it would necessarily. There's nothing that I can think of that makes any, as far as I know of, that makes a definitive statement that you are the only beings in the universe. When you look at the Bible is central to the fall of mankind and its redemption to God. It's not every answer in the universe as it's mistakenly thought of. It's not that. It never was. But so no, I don't think it disproves religion or faith of anything in that matter, because it's not touched on.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. I feel the same way, but I'm curious to see what people think. Todd, let's move this one to you, right? Do you see religion and existence, let's say it's fully confirmed, there's no doubt. Do you feel that would put a kink in people's faith, or would it hurt religion in major? Some people say, oh, it'd be the downfall of religion. I'm not sure that's the case. What do you think?
I think it might hurt organized religion, but people of faith, it's not going to affect people's faith. People who are faithful may even have stronger faith after something like that. Like in Buddhism, we don't it's not all about reincarnation. Really, what it's about is about finding peace and nirvana within yourself. Siddhartha was not, I don't think Siddhartha was some messiah. Dude, the guy just picked it under a juniper tree and said, I've got so much to worry about. I need to worry about less. And guess what? He felt better.
Sure. So, yeah.
The existence of aliens, the existence of otherworldly beings that are more intelligent and way advanced than us. I mean, I don't think that would bother someone of faith, really. They just say, wow, my God created something incredible out there too. Who knows, right? But I think that where it can hurt something in Western civilization might be organized religion, because there's going to be a lot of questions that maybe they'll tiptoe around, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people who have a lot of questions about things they've read, about things they've heard in scriptures that people may not want to answer right away. So I think that's where you might see some tiptoeing and some mamby-pamby answers and whatever, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. These are difficult answers to quantify, right? It's hard to, you're talking about trying to prove something that's very, invisible. So Rodney, let's move over to you, buddy. So what do you think? If we discovered there was this alien civilization, would it negate the use of religion, and why?
I have heard people of faith say, just because there are more people and more beings in the universe now doesn't mean that God didn't create them.
Yeah. Sure.
You know, which I thought was a pretty interesting take on it. And then the Catholic Church has even here recently in the past 10 years or so have been kind of leaning into, you know, the fact that just that point, you know, if they're out there, you know, they're all God's creatures.
Right. That does kind of make sense. There's a great one here in the comments too. What if there was an alien God that was suggested, right? Like, is it the same God? This is a mind-blowing subject.
Well, I'll give you, it'd be just the same thing as say the Native American belief in the Great White Spirit. It would be the interpretation of God to them versus, you know, and it doesn't necessarily conflict with any other interpretation of God at that point. So that's pretty much how I see that would happen.
Gotcha. So let's do a quick takeaway on what we think some of the things are that we talked about tonight. You know, there's still some discrepancies out there, whether people say whether or not this was this military exercise, you know, designed to test the reaction of these soldiers, or was it an actual alien encounter? I think that based on the fact that they were trained servicemen and that the HALT memorandum is still floating around out there, I think this one is real. I'm going to say that I think these guys saw something weird. Let's go around the room. See, Michael, start with you. Is it a hoax or is it real?
Oh, no, it's real. I believe that it's real. There's even, if you really want to deep dive into this,
what's your evidence where you went, okay, this one's probably real?
Well, the thing is, it's not just the servicemen, but the servicemen themselves were not alien. Oh, every time you look at somebody that has these alien encounters and everything, usually they're not, you find out that they were never believers in the first place. And even still after this, I think, not Pendleton, but the other one was like, it was something. I don't know if it was aliens, but it was something. So there's one way or another, whether they believe in aliens or not, is regardless of the fact that they experienced something that night that was out of this world, as it were. So
right,
literally or
potentially even a time traveling vehicle we threw out there,
right,
which may or may not have been trying to communicate them using a pictorial language. Okay, Todd, let's move it over to you. It boils right down to it. We went over some of the evidence. Was it this exercise for military intelligence and maybe something went wrong, or did these guys see a UFO?
Wow, the idea that it was an exercise that went awry, I like that. Like the idea that some three-legged alien came hobbling out, right? Did they see something like that? You know, when you read about things like that, it sometimes it doesn't lend credence to like, holy cow, something really happened. When you read things like that, I'm like, really? Did someone like put something together out there to scare them? But shoot, when you read the memorandum, when you listen to the audio recordings, and it wasn't soldiers that saw these things. I mean, there were like shepherds and stuff that saw
and the farmers, and there was a lot of disturbances. The dogs were all barking, for example.
Yeah, and it was like in the north area and the southern area of Rendlesham, right? And so like people saw two different crafts pop too, and shape-shifting crafts. So wow, something trippy really did happen out there. And it scared the hell out of the people who saw it.
Yeah. One of the most bizarre UFO incidents. Rodney, we got to hear from you, buddy. Same question. Was it a military exercise to gauge servicemen reactions, or did the Bentwater people see a UFO?
I think they saw a UFO. I think there's just too much, like Todd said, there's too many other people saw it as well. And the voices on the recordings, that's not fake. You can hear the terror and the just how distraught they are.
Yeah,
it's how disturbed they are. I believe it 100%.
Well, it seems like the takeaway tonight is that something real happened in Rendlesham Forest. That's my 2 cents on it. So if you had any takeaway from this, you know, the things that we talked about, what do you think we can learn from a sighting like this? Like my sense is that there's a genuine effort toward trying to communicate. I can't think of any other reason to have symbols on the side of the craft. And I know that some of the people said things like, well, it could be the instructions for the craft, but you know, go ahead, see.
Well, can I ask you a question? Have you looked at Larry Warren?
I don't think so.
Larry Warren said that he was there. Now there's a lot of skepticism about that and everything else like that. But Larry Warren is the first person that came out with it, supposedly back in 1984, maybe 81, 84, something like that. And what he says there, when he was there, that he actually saw childlike beings that were there with some type of belt or something going on. And again, you take it with a grain of salt, because I'm not sure. He was supposedly sort of some, the group, that the secret group or whatever that went out or whatever, and that he actually saw these beings there. Some people take him seriously, some people have not, and they've even to the point that they'll say, Pope, who is the one who has been writing about this and has been bringing this out, that they're actually a misinformation, like a Project Mockingbird, as it were, to come out to deter from any type of actual discovery. So I don't know if anybody's heard of that or not. And Larry Warren was pretty prevalent in the UFO circles,
Okay.
or ufology circles. So there's that. And again, take it with a grain of salt. At least with the two with Burroughs or Pendleton, you have they weren't conflicting accounts. They had kind of a similar account. And while he has a similar account, he just adds aliens to it. So there's that.
Mm-hmm. So, Todd, what do you make of it? Any kind of takeaway as far as the communication? What do you think's trying to be communicated to us here?
Maybe nothing. Again, are we looking too deep at something that literally just was an incident between a craft from another world that might have needed to stop for something, right? Maybe they needed to stop for kind of refueling. We have some energy here that they needed, an energy source. Maybe they're here doing some scientific investigation. Who knows, man? But as far as the communication thing, I mean, the symbols on the side of that craft could have been anything. Could have been anything from, like you said, a warning. Could have been anything, maybe instruction. Could have even been the make and model of the vehicle that they're flying. But the idea that binary code was transmitted kind of telepathically,
right.
buddy, that's something, man. And the fact that when coordinates were brought up based on those binary communications and binary numbers, you actually have locations on the planet, like actual locations on the planet. Now, is that just coincidence? I don't know. Maybe that's some serious communication going on that we're just not ready to quite comprehend yet.
I think some of these are good points. Rodney, do you want to take the final word on the communication? What could they potentially be trying to say here?
I have a question. Were there nuclear weapons at Rendlesham?
Yeah, I think there were. It's at least
classified.
Yeah, it's like a pretty deep site.
Well, there you go. I think,
and like I say, a somewhat curious involvement of high-level American and British upper officers, which that's not really rare, but it's rare when something like this happens. And the other thing that we didn't really touch on was this is one of the few times when it was actually witnessed that the craft touched the ground. A lot of times people see one in the air or they already see one on the ground. This was like the full experience. They watched the whole thing.
I think once again, it's several different instances have happened where they've been flying over nuclear sites and they've either activated or deactivated devices. And this might have been another incident of that, which to me could speak to maybe something was going on with the American and British militaries that they were aware of, because let's throw in the time travel. They're from the future, so they knew it was going to happen, so they came to stop it. Who knows, But that's definitely a possibility.
Well, it's funny you bring up about the nuclear thing, because one thing about the farm animals and everything that were around there, because you saw in that that declassification document about the animals going crazy, a couple of them died a little bit later. Yeah, and it was a farmer's dog, and I think it's from one of the farms, even when the guys talk about seeing in the distance, right? But he died, and the vet said it looked like it was some kind of a poisoning. Not to mention that site that you're showing where the spaceship is, the memorial is, all those trees were cut down because it's thought that there was actually radiation poisoning there. So my question is, would they elaborately make a story up like this to cover up some type of radiation leak?
Huh.
That's, I mean, you're talking about, you look at, okay, this is Peniston. I keep saying his name wrong. He was a very, he was like elevated. He was all in military.
These are
Like,
high
that
level
was his
officers.
career. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, would it be so far fetched to think, hey, Peniston, this is what we want you to say? And this is what comes out, because it's better to believe something fantastical and have them going left field and right field and let them know, oh shoot, in like 20 years they might be having children born with 5 or 6 arms. You know, that kind of thing.
One of the interesting small details is, like I say, it's really not too unusual that they're high level officers, but what is unusual is that it's from the 2 countries both together at once. And also supposedly during the sighting, I'm going to talk a little bit here about what they call the Oz factor. And basically what that means, Todd and I touched on this last week or 3 weeks ago, that when people see something that they can't quite understand, they almost kind of freeze for a second, and their mind, like they're trying to understand what they're seeing. And they describe that in this case as the Oz factor, like in the movie where you see in the city of Oz for the first time. And what happened was they said that the men, the servicemen in this case, there was 2 right in the front, they almost acted a little bit like they were hypnotized. And what they mean, well, they were walking up to the craft like sort of slow and not disoriented, but not fully understanding what they were seeing. So, Todd, let's move this one to you. Do you believe when these crafts are visiting that they have some kind of ability to sort of calm the people down that are not control them? You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, geez, maybe. What was the passage in the Bible about seeing angels for the first time? When you gaze upon the angels, like humans will be afraid of them because they have 3 faces and whatever, right?
Yeah. I wrote that column about Ezekiel, and they were all pretty tripped out by seeing what they claimed was an angel.
Well, probably, you see something like that, you really got to be calmed down after seeing something like that, so you don't have like mass hysteria going. Right?
Well, and when I say calm down, I'm sorry, I'm not really describing this very well, but they were almost sort of like,
oh, like pacified or something? Or?
Like pacified, exactly. And, because look, let's be honest, if the 4 of us were standing in a forest and we saw something like this,
yeah,
we'd be freaking out, right?
I definitely pee myself a little, but don't they say that like, sorry, I'm going to jump subjects here, but don't they say that when people have encounters like a cryptid like Sasquatch or even the Dogman, that there is like some kind of sonic frequency that happens, that these people, it almost puts them into like some weird physical trance, right?
There is some telepathy even in some cases where a werewolf, they felt like the werewolf was speaking to them in a sense of, you need to get out of here now or you're going to be in trouble, almost like the inner person trying to communicate with them. So there have been reports of that in various different cases. Yeah, absolutely.
Huh. So maybe it's something like that,
Where I was gently headed with it at the very beginning is that this Oz factor and the pacified airmen could have been a little bit tying back to what Todd mentioned earlier about something where time was a little bit manipulated. Like you're actually moving more slowly and thinking more slowly. And remember, even the reflections aren't lining up. So, Rodney, what do you think? Is time travel an element of the Rendlesham sighting?
I think it's completely possible because the video that came out where the ship was tilted, and then they put it under a different type of spectral lens, and it showed the black plumes coming out from it, and it wasn't hot around the craft. It was actually cool.
Right.
As soon as I heard that it was cool, my thought was, well, it's because they're bending. They're bending space or time.
Yeah.
They're sliding.
We sometimes call this bending gravity. That's the Bob Lazar kind of version.
So when that's done, there's a time displacement difference, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's part of what they were experiencing. When you talk about how they were kind of pacified approaching the craft, I think they might have just been seeing it in visually and in their mind's eyes, and they might have been like doing a little bit of traveling through time and receiving information and all of that at once, which explains why they were completely pacified, because they were absorbing and experiencing all of this at once as they were walking towards the craft.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's,
you know, there's a message also in the encounter that the commanding officers, a couple of them, were taking notes on the way the soldiers were behaving, which is a little bit of an odd thing to do, right, on their part. I don't think, as a matter of fact, I'm sure that if I was an officer and I was seeing a UFO come down and land and words started forming on it, I wouldn't look to see what the guy next to me was doing and write down notes about what he was doing. So now I get it. People say, oh, that's important for an officer. But it's also important for an exercise. And that's kind of an evidence of why they say it could have potentially been a training exercise.
Good point.
Right.
Good
And,
point.
like, we got to give the evidence where it's due, right? Like that does kind of suggest that. And the other thing, it's almost like somebody said, well, we need to get written evidence of what it looks like when soldiers experience this Oz factor, right? So it's like, oh, that's probably how you do it.
The only problem with that, though, it's two things. One, if you were going to have them record an Oz factor, then it automatically is corrupted because they'll know about it. So you'll never get that would be corrupted data. Two, the notes actually didn't surface until 2010, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
So the question comes in like, okay, now they said that they've taken this. Pope said he took this and had it examined. Now, mind you, Pope also worked for the Ministry of something to do with UFOs. I can't remember what the official title was, but he took it to have it. He could be examined on whether or not the handwriting was old enough, and supposedly it was. Yeah. So, but there's that's just the question, just to put everything, all the cards out on the table, as far as that's concerned. And they could have been told, and in that they could have been told that tonight we were trying to get an idea of documentation on how things go on the base, and that was just, you know, we're preparing them to take notes, but you know, I mean, there's a lot of factors that could go into it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a trippy case, and for a couple of reasons. I think a couple of the main ones to me are the fact that you've got governments involved in a very weird kind of way, and they're hiding it and not hiding it too well, and you know, just generally kind of screwing up the whole thing. And on the other hand, you've got these sort of terrified and confused airmen. And that's why it's particularly troublesome when reports say things like, well, there could have been a mass hallucination or hysteria or drugs. And it's like, these are men that are trained to not be that way. And they're trained to recognize things that are in the sky as part of a military exercise. So for them to be jacked up about seeing something like this, there's something to it.
All right.
You guys ever been around? Is anybody here a veteran?
No.
Okay. Have you ever been with, like, my best friend was a former Marine. We were on the beach in San Diego, and they had A-10 warthogs flying over the beach. And as soon as he heard it, he's like, "Warthog," and I'm like, "What?" And he pointed up.
Yeah.
So these guys know. He didn't even see it. He was looking right at me. He said, "Warthog." You know, they're trained. They know.
Yeah.
You know, weapons. You know, just from sound, aircraft. So, you know.
Well, that's a good point, right?
Yeah,
that's what they're trained to recognize that stuff. Yeah. I wanted to let me show you this one real quick. Do you guys know the Sicconi UFO sighting? When I show it to you, yeah, it's the one in Italy. And when I show you this, let's see, can you see that?
Oh, yeah.
This is the one. It was in the 70s. An Italian pilot, like a decorated war hero, saw this object outside of on his wing, and he was in one of these planes that is to take photos for aerial reconnaissance. So the plane is loaded up with film and photo taking stuff. He takes like 80 photos of this object. And it was 13,000 feet or something, moving in non-ballistic motion. And of course, the explanation from the air traffic control, who, by the way, witnessed it from the ground with binoculars, they said it's a weather balloon. So let's tackle this one real quick. This is the Saccone sighting, 1979. See, Michael Lanning, this one real or a hoax?
I don't know anything about this one at all.
Hey, I'm throwing you a curveball. Really, it just
Yeah.
makes the point that they're pilots and they're people that are trained to recognize that stuff. And that is admittedly a weird looking object.
I wish I see it in color. That's
Yeah.
That's one thing to say. But it's cigar shaped.
Right.
Right. I've actually well, I know someone who's had an encounter, and that was one of the things that she said was the cigar shape.
These are a little more rare.
I'm sorry?
They're a little more rare than the saucer.
Yeah. But I would like to have seen it. I would like to have seen it in color. Really.
I'll get some more info on that one, but let's each chime in. Todd, how about you? Does this sighting you think was hoax or real?
I mean, it's definitely something in the air there, right?
Yeah. 13,000 feet, kind of unlikely for a balloon. Also in 1979, radar was primarily picked up things made of metal. The object showed on the radar. That means that if it was a weather balloon, it wouldn't have showed up on the radar. Rodney, how about you? Let's jump over the little bit that we discussed it. Do you think it's real or is it a hoax?
No, I think it's real. I think the point that the radar at that time only picked up metal, and the weather balloons are made of neoprene.
Yeah, exactly right. They're made of neoprene, which almost radar invisible in those days.
Right. Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, there is a mountain in Italy. I can't remember the name of it, but it is believed that there is a hidden extraterrestrial base in the mountain, because they have seen over the course of centuries lights and crafts flying in and out of this mountain.
Yeah, man.
And also, real quick, Italy apparently recovered a UFO pre-World War II, and the Nazis went in and took possession of that, and that's the device that they used to gain air superiority and develop better aircraft and stuff during World War II, because of the craft that they recovered from
the buzz
Italy.
bombs.
Yeah.
Or is that a V rocket? There's a V rocket too, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
the Messerschmitts, the Messerschmitts alone were the fastest propelled planes of the war. Until the Americans came out with the Mustangs at the very end of the war. But yeah, they were the Nazis were way ahead of everybody, and it's theorized that that's because they took the craft from Italy. I think it was in 30 or 31 when this happened, and the Germany took possession of it and went crazy with it.
Nice. Well, this has been a great episode tonight. Thanks for chiming in on the Saccone incident. That's one of my favorites too. So I've enjoyed talking about Rendlesham Forest. It's one of my favorites. Okay. Before we go, let's take a second and tell us where we can find your works, or if there's anything you want to promote, I'll shout it out. See, you go first. See, Michael.
Oh, as always, you can check me out at landingart.com and Facebook, things like that. As always. So nothing to promote right now. So yeah,
cool, man. And thanks really so much for helping us do this, man. You've been doing a great job. Todd, how about you, buddy? Thanks for the books in the mail. You're my hero. Made one of the most memorable birthdays ever for my son. But tell us a little bit more about where your work is right now, where we can find you.
Still working with Sabaton. I think I'm going to be actually doing some merch design for them as well soon. But
nice.
The next issue of Camouflage drops probably in a few weeks. So I'll make sure I save you guys a couple copies. I got some Kickstarter promotions that are happening. Carlos Raphael's Pandora's Army, which is a graphic novel, all ages graphic novel. I'm lettering that. Mally Simpson's got something called Elite Warriors and Marvelous that's coming out, and lettering that for him. I think Elite Warriors we've that's already done. That's in the can. And got some covers coming out from HCMP and Pink Power.
Oh, nice. Congrats, man. I'm happy to see you so busy.
Thank you. It's nice to be busy for a change,
Yeah, you deserve it.
Yeah,
Rodney. Oh, go ahead. Are you good, Todd?
Yeah.
Rodney, thanks so much for joining us, man. I was so happy to see you here. We had a terrific UFO show before.
Thanks for having me.
Before we wrap up, listen, tell us where we can find your work.
you can find me at my website, rodneyfike.com. Also, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Art of Rodney Fike. And I don't really have any projects going on right now. Probably looking at a Roadkill Rampage trade Kickstarter sometime early 24 or early 25, and other things possibly. We'll see.
Nice.
Things are in luck.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining me, UFO research team. This was a fun one. We'll be talking to you guys next week on the Creative Cranium, same time slot, and then we'll be back with the UFO show 1 month from today. We're going to do the first Friday of every month. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you then.